Alex, the number 9 pick in this NFL draft, I think is a fascinating spot for the Chicago Bears. Now, we know they're going to take Caleb Williams with the number 1 overall pick, but there's a lot of different directions that they could go with the 9th overall pick. What do you think the best option for Ryan Poles and the Bears at 9? Where do you think they go there, and what would you do?
I think in anything in these preliminary draft talks and these preliminary draft rooms, they only have four picks, two ones, a third, and a fourth. I think the initial idea, which was probably to draft Roma Dunze, had you kind of have to maybe take a step back in this deep wide receiver draft and say, you know what? Let's trade that number 9 pick up some extra picks between the first and perhaps fifth rounds and maybe something next year as well, since that's going to be a top 10 pick and possibly a quarterback available there, wink, wink, in Minnesota, in terms of what they can do there. So I think they can really turn that. And Ryan Poles, as we have seen since he has become the GM, has truly been working that war room draft board like a champ.
Yeah, absolutely. In my mock draft that I put out, I had them taking Jared Verse, the pass rusher, the edge defender out of Florida State, because I think adding a defensive piece there makes sense. Montez Sweat comes over midway through the year and led the team in sacks. So clearly they still have a ways to go to improve the pass rush. Now he added a lot, but I think you put another pass rusher opposite of him. Now you give that defense a little extra pop to help out that young secondary that's really starting to look good. I like what they're doing on that back end. So maybe you add a guy like him to kind of get some more pressure on the quarterback and get this defense going in the right direction, because I think adding a wide receiver, it makes sense and I get it, but I think the free agency movement that Ryan Poles did there by adding Keenan Allen, they already had DJ Moore. I think if you add a guy like a Roma Dunze, it makes a lot of sense. And I know that's who you had in your mock draft. And I get it. I understand why that could be a good move, because if you add him, now you're talking about maybe one of the best wide receiver rooms in the NFL. And for a young quarterback, that's a great thing to have. Not to mention you have a pretty solid young tight end in Cole Kmet as well. But you could also address the offensive line here, Alex. Could they go with one of these top offensive tackles to bookend with their young tackle from last year, Darnell Wright?
Right. So we know they have Braxton Jones, who was drafted a year before Donnell Wright, and he seems to be solid. I'm not going to say great, but he seems to be a solid piece there. So it depends on what you project out that player to be. Even though, let's just say Joe Alt is there, like let's just say, do we want to move Braxton Jones and say that, you know what, let's put Joe Alt and we have our bookings for the next 10 years on each side, along with our franchise quarterback, or do we trade out, maybe not even get both Minnesota picks because it's only 11-9, swap with Minnesota, perhaps you get that second number 1 pick, and then you can also maybe get a second, third out of them as well. And how about, and I've talked about this player as one of my sleepers, how about being able to draft a Tavondre Sweat in the middle of that line, because you have a bookend in Montez Sweat as a pass rusher? How about getting a run stuffing huge battleship of a defensive tackle in the line? Or if you do end up getting that 23rd pick, between Newton and Murphy, I think that one of those pass rushing defensive tackles can be there to play along with Montez Sweat. So I think they have a lot of different directions. I mean, I've said this before on previous pods. If you haven't checked it out, you need to go ahead and do that. He's really working the board the way I play Madden, the way I do it in Madden. He really is just saying, you know what, I'm always going to trade back and get more value. And they lucked up. Sorry, Carolina Panthers fans, you have done this. This is why we are here. And Ryan Poles literally looks like a genius. And if the Bears have not already given this man an extension, they should already start talking about working on one now.
Yeah, like I said, it's just an interesting spot because I think there's a lot of different directions they can go. There's going to be some really good players available at 9. And because of that, it's going to be tough to want to move out of that spot. If there's a guy who's really high on Ryan Poles' draft board, is he going to want to move off of that pick? But I think the value play is maybe trading back, because like you said, if you add some additional picks, you can address more spots, and you can go to a wide receiver in the second round. And we know there's going to be some good ones still available. So maybe you're not getting an Odunze, maybe you're not getting an elite wide receiver, but you could still add a wide receiver later in this draft because we know how deep this class is at that position too.
Absolutely. A guy that we've been championing on our shows is Xavier Leggett in the second round. He's a guy that can be there. Xavier Worthy, the Xaviers now that we call them, he could also be, available there if you trade back and you have a pick in that second round. So there are a lot of options. I think it's been a while since Bears fans have been able to be this excited about their team. I mean, throughout their history, they have not had what we would call a traditional franchise quarterback. And I think this is the first time they're getting one that looks like he can be that. And now there's a lot of excitement around being a fan of this team, and they can get a lot of buzz going and a lot of momentum going into the season and next seasons ahead as well.